That morning, the house was so quiet, I could hear my own heart beating. On the kitchen table, there was just a white envelope and a note that read, "Figure it out yourself." They chose Paris instead of standing beside me on my wedding day, but they did not know that by tonight, the entire world would know who I married, and everyone would see exactly who had played themselves. My name is Jasmine Romero, and on the morning of what was supposed to be the most significant day of my life, I woke up to a silence so heavy it felt like a physical weight pressing down on my chest. Usually, a wedding morning is a symphony of coordinated chaos. There should have been the sound of blow dryers humming in the hallway, the frantic clicking of heels on hardwood floors, the smell of hairspray and fresh coffee, and my mother's voice rising an octave higher than usual as she fussed over flower arrangements. There should have been laughter, or at least the high-stress bickering that passes for affection in my family. But as I lay there in the guest room of the sprawling rental estate in Kennebunkport, Maine, staring at the ceiling beams, I heard absolutely nothing. No footsteps, no voices, not even the clatter of a spoon against a ceramic mug. It was 7 a.m. The light filtering through the sheer curtains was that pale, ghostly gray specific to the Maine coast, a light that offers no warmth, only visibility. I sat up, pushing back the heavy quilt. The air in the room was cold, stagnant. A knot of unease began to tighten in my stomach. Distinct from the usual pre-wedding jitters, this was primal. It was the instinct of an animal realizing the herd had moved on without it. I walked out into the hallway, my bare feet making no sound on the polished floorboards. I checked the room next to mine, where my sister Kelsey was supposed to be sleeping. The door was wide open. The bed was made, not just made, but pristine. The pillows fluffed and the duvet smoothed flat, as if no one had slept there at all. I felt a chill run down my spine. I moved to the master suite my parents had claimed. Empty. The closets were open, revealing nothing but bare hangers swinging slightly in the draft from the air conditioning. They were gone. Panic is a strange thing. It does not always hit you like a wave. Sometimes it arrives slowly, like rising water. I ran down the grand staircase, my hand gripping the banister so hard my knuckles turned white. I checked the living room, empty. The dining room, empty. The only sound was the distant, rhythmic crashing of the Atlantic Ocean against the rocks outside, a sound that suddenly felt mocking in its indifference. I burst into the kitchen. It was a massive, chef-grade space designed for large family gatherings, with a 10-foot marble island that should have been covered in breakfast pastries and mimosa supplies. Instead, the counters were wiped clean. There was no smell of bacon, no half-finished cups of tea. The sterility of the room was terrifying. It looked like a showroom, not a home occupied by a family preparing for a wedding. Then I saw it, in the dead center of the kitchen island, sitting alone on the expanse of cold white marble, was a single white envelope. I approached it slowly. My breath caught in my throat. I recognized the handwriting immediately. It was sharp, angular, and hurried. It was Kelsey's handwriting. It simply said, "Jasmine." My hands were trembling as I picked it up. The paper felt thick and expensive. I tore it open, desperate for an explanation, a rational reason for this disappearing act. Maybe there was an emergency. Maybe someone got sick. Maybe they went out for a surprise breakfast run and got delayed. My mind raced through a dozen scenarios, each trying to shield me from the truth. I pulled out the note. It was not a letter. It was a single sentence, scrawled in black ink. "Figure it out yourself." I stared at the words. The letters seemed to swim before my eyes. Figure it out yourself. It was a phrase I'd heard 1,000 times growing up. It was what Kelsey said when she locked me out of the house in the rain because she had friends over. It was what my mother said when Kelsey borrowed my car and left it with an empty tank 3 towns over. It was the family motto, reserved exclusively for me. It was not just a message, it was a test, a cruel, twisted test designed to see if I would break. I dropped the note on the counter. I ran to the front door and threw it open, stumbling out onto the gravel driveway. The early morning fog was thick, clinging to the pine trees like wet cotton. I looked at the parking area. Empty. The rental SUV my father had driven was gone. Kelsey's convertible was gone. The driveway was a blank canvas of gray gravel. They had not just gone to the store. They had packed their bags, loaded their cars, and left. They had evacuated the premises as if I were a contagion they needed to escape. I stood there in my pajamas, the damp sea air biting at my skin, shivering uncontrollably. They left, on my wedding day. My family had abandoned me in a rental house 3 hours away from civilization. With vendors arriving in 4 hours and a ceremony starting in 8, I went back inside, locking the door behind me. The silence was no longer heavy. It was violent. I walked back to the kitchen and stared at the note again. Why? Why would they do this? My phone, which I had left on the kitchen counter the night before to charge, buzzed against the marble. The sound was like a gunshot in the quiet room. I picked it up. A notification from Instagram. Kelsey_R just added to their story. My thumb hovered over the screen. I knew, deep down, what I was going to see, but my brain refused to process the malice required to execute it. I tapped the screen. The image loaded with crisp, high-definition clarity. It was a selfie. Kelsey was in the foreground, holding a flute of golden champagne. Her lips painted a perfect, victorious red. She was wearing oversized sunglasses and a designer trench coat, but it was the background that stopped my heart. Behind her, rising majestically into a blue sky that was definitely not the foggy gray of Maine, was the Eiffel Tower. Paris. They were in Paris. I tapped to the next slide. It was a video. My mother and father were sitting at a bistro table, clinking glasses, laughing at something Kelsey was saying from behind the camera. They looked relaxed, happy, relieved. And then the caption appeared, typed in a playful, elegant font across the bottom of the screen. Some weddings are better skipped. I stared at the screen until the backlight dimmed and turned off. They had planned this. You do not just wake up and go to Paris. This required tickets purchased weeks, maybe months in advance. They had sat at dinner with me last night, smiled at me, toasted to my future happiness, all while knowing their bags were already packed. They had waited until I went to sleep, crept out of the house like thieves, and drove to the airport to catch a red-eye flight to France. Why? Because Kelsey wanted a brand trip. Because the wedding was not about her. Because my happiness was taking up too much space in a room where she was accustomed to being the only light source. I waited for the tears. I waited for the crushing wave of sorrow that I assumed was the correct biological response to being orphaned by choice on your wedding day. I waited to collapse onto the kitchen floor and sob until my throat was raw. But the tears did not come. Instead, something strange happened in the center of my chest. The sharp, hot pain that had flared up when I saw the empty driveway began to cool. It solidified. It turned into something hard, dense, and incredibly heavy. It felt like iron. I looked at the phone again. Some weddings are better skipped. They thought this was a game. They thought this was another one of Kelsey's power plays, a way to remind me of my place in the hierarchy. They expected me to call them, crying, begging, asking them why they hated me, pleading for them to come back. They were probably sitting in that Parisian bistro right now, checking their phones, waiting for the explosion. They wanted the drama. They wanted the tragedy. They wanted me to be the disaster so they could be the rescuers, or at least the superior observers. I set the phone down on the counter, face down. I picked up the envelope again. I looked at the note one last time. Figure it out yourself. Okay, I whispered to the empty room. My voice sounded strange, lower than usual, stripped of any tremor. Okay. I did not crumple the note. I did not tear it up. I folded it neatly along the original crease. I walked out of the kitchen and back up the grand staircase. I moved with a steady, mechanical precision. I went into my room, where my wedding dress hung on the back of the door, shrouded in white plastic. Next to it was my silk getting-ready robe, embroidered with the word bride on the back. I put on the robe, I tied the sash tight around my waist, then I took the folded note and slipped it into the deep pocket of the robe. I patted the pocket. I could feel the sharp corner of the paper against my hip. It was not a keepsake. It was not a souvenir of a tragedy. It was evidence. It was a receipt. They had handed me a weapon, thinking it was an anchor that would drag me down. They did not realize that they had just severed the only rope that was holding me back. I walked to the window of the bedroom and looked out at the ocean. The fog was starting to lift, just barely, revealing the dark, churning water beneath. The Atlantic Ocean does not care if you are sad. It does not care if you are lonely. It just keeps crashing against the rocks, reshaping the coastline, one wave at a time. I looked at my reflection in the window glass. I looked pale, my dark hair messy, my eyes wide. But underneath the shock, I saw something else. I saw the engineer. I saw the woman who managed complex security grids for a living. I saw the woman who solved problems that other people said were impossible. My family had vacated their positions. They had resigned from their roles as parents and sister. Fine. If the position is vacant, the obligations are void. You want to see how I handle this? I said to the reflection. You want to see if I can figure it out? A cold smile touched my lips. It did not reach my eyes, but it was there. Watch me. I turned away from the window. I walked over to the vanity table where my makeup artist was scheduled to set up in 2 hours. I sat down. I looked at myself in the mirror. Really looked at myself. I was Jasmine Romero. I was not the sidekick in Kelsey's reality show anymore. I was not the daughter who had to apologize for existing. Today, I was getting married. I was marrying a man who knew exactly who I was. A man who had seen the cracks in this family foundation long before I admitted they were there. Evan had warned me. He had told me they would let me down. He had just underestimated the scale of the drop. But I had a parachute. I had always had a parachute. I just never pulled the cord because I was too busy trying to hold their hands. Now, my hands were free. I picked up my phone again. I did not call my mother. I did not text Kelsey. I did not send a frantic message to my father. I opened my contacts and scrolled to the wedding planner's number. I checked the time. 7:20 in the morning. She would be awake. I was no longer the bride waiting to be pitied. The silence in the house was no longer an absence. It was a blank slate, and I was about to write a story on it that they would never forget. I stood up, tightened the sash of my robe one more time, and walked out of the room. I was not walking to a tragedy. I was walking to the rest of my life, and for the first time in 26 years, I was the one driving. To understand why I stood in that window looking at the fog without shedding a tear. You have to understand the architecture of the house I grew up in. I do not mean the physical beams and drywall. I mean the emotional blueprint. In the Romero household, there were 2 distinct roles, cast long before we were old enough to understand the script. Kelsey was the protagonist, the sun around which our domestic galaxy spun. She was bright, chaotic, and perpetually forgiven. I was the supporting character, the stubborn one, the operational logistics manager who was expected to absorb the impact of her collisions with reality. If Kelsey got an A on a test, we went out for a celebratory dinner because she was brilliant. If I got an A on a test, it was noted with a nod because I was just lucky that the questions suited my memory. If Kelsey crashed the car, it was because the roads were dangerous and she was just a child learning to navigate a harsh world. If I got a parking ticket, I was careless and irresponsible with money. The double standard was not a bug in the system. It was the operating system itself. I escaped into logic. I found comfort in things that had clear rules, inputs, and outputs. That is why I became a system security engineer. I liked code. Code does not have favorites. Code does not care if you are charming or if you have a dazzling smile. If you miss a semicolon, the program crashes. It is fair. I landed a job at Ridgeway Gridworks right out of college. Ridgeway is not the kind of company that throws office parties with open bars or has ping-pong tables in the break room. It is a grim, serious infrastructure firm that manages the energy distribution software for 3 states. The culture there is built on paranoia and precision. We deal with critical infrastructure. A mistake at Ridgeway does not mean a website goes down. It means hospitals lose power and traffic lights stop working. I loved it. I loved the discipline. I loved that my value was measured in uptime percentages and threat mitigation, not in personality. For 2 years, I built a reputation as a fortress. I was the person you called when the firewall showed anomalies at 2 in the morning. I was on track for a senior lead position, a promotion that would have changed my financial life and validated every late night I had spent staring at monitors. Then came the incident that taught me exactly what I was worth to my family. It was 3 years ago. I remember the date perfectly because it was a Tuesday in November. I walked into the office, coffee in hand, ready for a standard morning briefing. Instead, my ID badge did not work at the turnstile. The red light flashed, a harsh, denying beep that echoed in the lobby. Before I could try again, 2 men from internal security, people I knew, people I had eaten lunch with, approached me. They did not smile. They asked me to come with them to a conference room off the main floor. They sat me down and slid a file across the table. It was a log of unauthorized data exfiltration. Someone had used a remote access key to bypass the tertiary security layer and download sensitive grid schematics. It was a sloppy hack, noisy and brute force, the kind of thing that triggers alarms instantly. But the damage was done. The schematics were proprietary. The access key used to open the door belonged to me. I stared at the timestamp. The breach had happened at 9 in the evening the previous night. I had been asleep. I told them this. I told them to check my location data. My phone pings. They looked at me with a mix of pity and professional detachment. They told me that the access came from my personal laptop, the one I sometimes used for remote monitoring, via a secure tunnel that had been manually approved by my biometric signature. I felt the blood drain from my face. I was suspended immediately pending a full investigation. As I walked out of the building with a cardboard box containing my personal effects, the shame was hot and suffocating. My colleagues, people who had trusted me with the keys to the kingdom, looked away. I was a pariah. I was the traitor who had sold out the grid. I went home to my apartment and tore my life apart trying to find the breach. I checked my router logs. I checked my laptop. And that was when I found the ghost. There was a session login from the night before, but it was not a hack from Russia or a phishing attack. It was a local login. Someone had physically opened my laptop, typed in my password, and used my thumbprint scanner dongle, which I kept in my desk drawer. I drove to my parents' house. I had visited them the night before for a family dinner. I had brought my work bag because I was on call. I had left the bag in the living room while I helped my mother in the kitchen. I walked into the house, shaking with a rage that felt cold and deadly. Kelsey was on the sofa, editing photos on her tablet. My parents were watching the news. I threw the termination warning on the coffee table. I demanded to know who touched my computer. Kelsey did not even look up immediately. She just swiped on her screen and said casually that she had borrowed it for 20 minutes while I was doing dishes. She said her laptop was updating and she needed to submit a portfolio for an online graphic design contest before the deadline. She said she just needed a machine with a high-speed connection and a good graphics card to render a file. I asked her what files she accessed. She shrugged and said she clicked on some folder that looked like cool geometric patterns to use as a background texture for her design. She thought they were just wallpapers I had saved. She had downloaded confidential grid schematics to use as a background for a fashion mood board. I stood there, waiting for the horror to hit them. I explained, in a voice that was trembling, that I was suspended. I explained that I could lose my security clearance, which meant I could never work in this industry again. I explained that Ridgeway Gridworks was treating this as industrial espionage. I waited for my parents to scream. I waited for them to ground her, to admonish her, to drive me to my office to explain everything to my boss. Instead, the room went quiet. My mother looked at the termination paper, then at Kelsey, who was now looking a little bit sheepish but mostly annoyed that I was yelling. My mother sighed. She actually sighed, as if I had dropped a glass of milk. She looked at me and said that Kelsey did not mean any harm. She said that Kelsey was just trying to be creative, that she had a lot of pressure to win this contest because it could launch her influencer career. I looked at my father. He was the one who usually cared about reputation. I begged him to understand. I told him I needed to take Kelsey to the Ridgeway legal team to sign an affidavit admitting she had used the machine without my consent. It was the only way to clear my name. My father took a sip of his tea. He looked at me with a hard, flat expression. He told me to lower my voice. He said that bringing Kelsey into a corporate legal battle would terrify her. He said that if she signed a confession, it might go on her permanent record. It might look like she was a hacker. It could ruin her reputation before she even started her career. He told me to take the hit. He said that I was smart. He said I would bounce back. He said Ridgeway was just one company, and I could find another job. But Kelsey? Kelsey was fragile. Kelsey needed protection. He told me not to make a big scene out of a simple mistake. A simple mistake. She had destroyed 3 years of my work and torched my professional integrity to make a collage. I realized then that I was not just the second child. I was the insurance policy. I was the spare part they kept in the trunk to replace the flat tire on Kelsey's joyride. I did not scream. I did not throw things. I learned a lesson that day that was more valuable than any degree. I learned that in this house, justice was a luxury item, and I could not afford it. The currency required to buy justice for me was pain for Kelsey, and my parents refused to pay that price. I went back to Ridgeway the next day. I did not turn Kelsey in. I could not bring myself to destroy my family publicly, even if they had destroyed me privately. I resigned before they could fire me. I signed a non-disclosure agreement that effectively admitted fault in exchange for them sealing the record so I would not be prosecuted. I walked away with no reference, a black mark on my internal industry file, and a severance package that barely covered 2 months of rent. I spent the next 6 months in a professional wilderness. I could not get hired at any major firm because the background checks flagged the Ridgeway exit as suspicious. I had to take freelance coding gigs, fixing websites for local bakeries and setting up firewalls for small dental offices. It was humiliating. I went from protecting the state energy grid to removing malware from a receptionist's desktop, but that humiliation was the crucible. It burned away the last remnants of my desire for my parents' approval. I stopped going to Sunday dinners. I stopped answering their calls immediately. I became a ghost in their lives, just like I was a ghost in my own career. And it was in that cold, dark winter of my life that I took a contract job for a small nonprofit organization in a coastal town that was trying to modernize its microgrid. It was low pay, unglamorous work, the kind of job a high-flying engineer would never take, but I was not high-flying anymore. I was grounded. The project was led by a community organizer, or so I thought. He was the one who hired me. But on the first day, when I arrived at the dusty community center that served as the headquarters, the man who opened the door was not the organizer. He was wearing a faded flannel shirt and work boots covered in mud. He had a smudge of grease on his cheek, and he was holding a wrench. He looked like a mechanic or a line worker. He introduced himself simply as Evan. He did not ask for my resume. He did not ask why a Ridgeway engineer was working for peanuts in a drafty basement. He just pointed to a schematic on the wall, a mess of red lines and inefficient loops, and asked me if I could fix it. I looked at the diagram. It was a disaster. It was chaotic and vulnerable, much like my life at that moment, but I saw the pattern. I saw the way to reroute the power, to bypass the broken nodes, to make the system resilient. I picked up a marker and started drawing. I worked for 4 hours straight, ignoring the cold, ignoring the fact that I was overqualified and underpaid. When I finally stepped back, the diagram was clean, it was efficient, it was safe. I turned around. Evan was sitting on a folding chair, watching me. He had been watching me the whole time. He did not look at the whiteboard. He was looking at my hands, at the way I stood, at the tension in my shoulders that had finally started to release. He asked me what I was running from. It was not a pickup line. It was a diagnostic question. He spoke like an engineer of human nature. I told him I was not running. I told him I was rebuilding. He smiled, and it was the first time in 6 months that I felt seen. He told me that he liked rebuilding things, too. He told me that sometimes you have to let the old structure collapse completely before you can build something that will actually stand. I did not know then who he really was. I did not know that the faded flannel shirt was a choice, not a necessity. I did not know that the community project was funded by his own private capital. A tiny fraction of a fortune that he managed with the same quiet precision I applied to my code. All I knew was that for the first time since the incident, I was in a room with someone who valued the work, not the noise. I did not know that the isolation my family had forced upon me was actually a gift. They had pushed me out of their warm, toxic orbit and sent me drifting into the dark, right into the path of the only person who could understand the gravity of my anger. They thought they had broken me. They did not realize they had just cleared the site for new construction. And as I looked at Evan that day, I realized that I was done waiting for an apology that would never come. I was ready to build something that did not require their permission to exist. The weeks that followed my departure from the corporate world were defined by mud, sea salt, and a man who seemed allergic to talking about himself. Technically, Evan Hartley was my supervisor on the coastal microgrid project. The title on his badge said Operations Lead, a vague designation that usually meant the person who handled schedules and ordered lunch. But Evan did not act like any manager I had ever met at Ridgeway. He did not hold meetings that could have been emails. He did not use corporate buzzwords like synergy or circle back. He worked. I spent my first month knee-deep in tidal marshland, helping install sensors for a flood monitoring system that would trigger the local backup generators. It was grueling physical work combined with delicate calibration. Most days, I went home with dirt under my fingernails and hair smelling like brackish water. And every single day, Evan was right there beside me, hauling cables and checking voltage meters. He drove a gray pickup truck that was 5 or 6 years old. It was clean, but utilitarian. The kind of vehicle you bought because you needed to haul lumber, not because you wanted to intimidate people in traffic. He wore boots that were scuffed from use, not distressed for fashion. When we stopped for lunch at the roadside diners that dotted the coastline, he ordered turkey clubs and iced tea. He never looked at his phone while we ate. I assumed he was exactly what he looked like. A competent, hard-working guy making a decent salary in the renewable energy sector. Someone who preferred the field to the boardroom. I saw him as a mirror of what I wanted to be. Someone defined by what they did, not what they owned. One evening, about 2 months into the project, we were the last 2 people left at the site. The sun was setting, casting a long golden light over the marsh. We were sitting on the tailgate of his truck, reviewing the efficiency data from the new sensors. The numbers were good, better than good. My optimization code had increased the battery storage efficiency by 15%. I was proud of it, but I was waiting for the criticism. I was waiting for him to tell me that I should have aimed for 20%, or that I had taken too long to write the script. That was the rhythm I was used to. Instead, Evan handed me a bottle of water and looked out at the horizon. "You are overqualified for this," he said. It was not a question. It was a statement of fact, delivered without any accusation. I stiffened. "I enjoy the work. The code is clean." "The code is brilliant," he corrected. He turned to look at me, his eyes dark and serious. "But you are working like someone who is trying to apologize for being here. You double-check your own logs 3 times. You document every 5 minutes of your time as if you expect to be audited." I looked down at my hands. He had seen the trauma response I thought I was hiding so well. "If you did not have to prove anything to anyone," Evan asked quietly, "if you did not have to justify your paycheck or your existence, what would you actually build?" The question hung in the air, in my family. Nobody asked what you wanted to build. They asked what would make the most money, or what would sound most impressive at a cocktail party. "I would focus on resilience," I said, the words coming out before I could filter them. "Big grids are fragile. One failure cascades into a blackout. I want to build isolated, self-healing systems for these small coastal towns. Systems that stay on when the rest of the world goes dark. But there is no glory in it. It is just keeping the lights on." Evan smiled. It was a rare, genuine expression that crinkled the corners of his eyes. Glory is just noise. Jasmine, keeping the lights on is everything. That was the moment the professional distance between us collapsed. We shifted my role the next day. I moved off the general installation team and started leading a pilot program for the autonomous micro-solutions I had described. Evan cleared the bureaucratic hurdles for me, shielding me from the paperwork so I could just work. We started spending our evenings together, not as colleagues, but as two people who found silence comfortable. We fell into a relationship with the ease of gravity. There were no games. There was no hard to get. He was fiercely protective of his privacy, which I respected because I was guarding my own bruises. We never talked about money. I insisted on splitting the checks at dinner, and he never argued. Though he always made sure to leave the tip in cash. He lived in a modest, rented bungalow near the water, sparsely furnished but filled with books on engineering, history, and oceanography. I thought I had found a fellow refugee from the rat race, a man who could have been more, but chose to be less because he understood the cost of ambition. I started telling him about Kelsey and fragments. I never sat him down for the tragic backstory monologue. It came out in moments of weakness, a flinch when he moved too fast, a bitter comment I made when a mother and daughter walked past us arguing in a park. I told him about the borrowed laptop, though I downplayed the severity of the legal threat. I told him how my parents had asked me to be the bigger person until I felt like I was shrinking into nothing. Evan listened differently than other men I had dated. He did not offer to go beat them up. He did not tell me to just cut them off, as if it were that simple. He listened like he was analyzing a structural stress fracture. He memorized the details. One rainy Tuesday. We were cooking pasta in his small kitchen. I had just gotten off the phone with my mother, who had spent 40 minutes complaining that I had not liked Kelsey's latest post about her wellness journey. I was fuming, chopping vegetables with unnecessary force. "She is 30 years old," I snapped, "and my mother treats her like a toddler who needs a standing ovation for eating her vegetables, and I am the bad guy because I do not want to clap." Evan took the knife out of my hand gently and set it down. He turned me to face him. "Stop trying to audit their logic, Jasmine," he said. "You are trying to find a rational pattern in an emotional scam. There isn't one." "It is just they are my family," I said, my voice breaking. "They love me. They just love her louder." Evan looked at me with an intensity that made me shiver. "There are people who love you for who you are," he said, "and then there are people who love the role you play for them. They love the safety net you provide. They love the punching bag you become when they are frustrated. That is not love. That is utility." He paused, brushing a strand of hair behind my ear. "Be careful. People who love the utility will leave exactly when you need them most, because a tool that needs maintenance is no longer useful to them." I laughed, a dry, hollow sound. "You sound like a fortune cookie written by a pessimist." "I am a realist," he said, "and I see how much you give them. I am just wondering what happens when you stop." I did not know then that he was not guessing. I did not know that he had likely run a background check on my family the moment we started dating, not to spy on me, but to assess the threat level to the woman he was falling in love with. 6 months later, he proposed. It was not on a jumbotron. It was not at a 5-star restaurant. We were on the roof of the community center where we had first met, fixing a solar panel alignment. It was windy, and my hair was a mess. He handed me a wrench, and then he handed me a small velvet box. "I want to build things with you," he said. "Permanent things." The ring was beautiful, a vintage cut that looked timeless, not trendy. It was elegant, but I had no idea of its appraisal value. I just knew it fit perfectly. We sat on the roof and talked about the wedding. "I want it small," I said immediately. "Just us. Maybe a justice of the peace. A dinner afterwards with a few friends. No speeches. No drama." Evan nodded. "If that is what you want, we can do it tomorrow." "My parents." I hesitated. "They would never forgive me if I eloped. They care about the image. We have to invite them." "Okay," Evan said. We invite them, but we keep it small, backyard barbecue style, 50 people max. It sounded perfect. It sounded safe. But I made the mistake of announcing the engagement at Sunday dinner. The moment the words left my mouth, Kelsey screamed. Not a scream of joy for me, but a scream of opportunity. She grabbed my hand to look at the ring, assessed it in 2 seconds, and then immediately looked at my mother. "Finally," Kelsey shouted. "We can do a double feature content series. Sister of the Bride looks are trending right now." "We are keeping it small," I said, trying to reclaim the moment. "Just a backyard thing." "Don't be ridiculous," my mother said, waving her hand as if I had suggested we get married in a sewer. "You are the first one getting married. We have to do it properly. The neighbors will talk if we do a barbecue. They will think you are pregnant or broke." "We are broke," I joked, trying to lighten the mood. "Evan and I are just engineers." "Speak for yourself," Kelsey said, pulling out her phone. "I have sponsors who have been dying for wedding content. If I pitch this right, we can get the venue for free. We just need something aesthetic, not a backyard." "No," I said firmly. "No sponsors, no content. This is my wedding." Kelsey's face fell. She did the thing she always did, the trembling lip, the watering eyes. "I just wanted to help," she whispered. "I just wanted to give you something nice for once. Why do you always have to make me feel stupid?" "She is just trying to be a good sister." "Jasmine," my father cut in, his voice stern. "Why do you have to be so difficult? Let her help plan. She has an eye for these things." I looked at Evan across the table. His face was unreadable. He was watching them with that same analytical detachment he used on faulty wiring. "It is fine," Evan said calmly. The table went silent. I looked at him, betrayed. "Evan?" "If it means that much to them," Evan said, holding my gaze, "let them pick the venue, as long as I get to marry you. I do not care where we stand." Kelsey squealed and immediately started typing on her phone. "Kennebunkport," she announced. "I saw this estate in Maine, very old money aesthetic, perfect for the fall." I felt a sinking sensation in my stomach. Maine was hours away. It would be expensive. It would be a production. "Evan," I whispered later, as we walked to his truck. "Why did you agree to that? We can't afford a Kennebunkport estate." Evan opened the door for me. "Do not worry about the cost," he said. "I have some savings, and if Kelsey thinks she can get a deal, let her try." "It is going to turn into the Kelsey show," I warned him. "She is going to make it about her." Evan started the engine. He put his hand on my knee, his grip warm and reassuring. "Let her," he said, and there was an edge to his voice that I had never heard before. "Let her build the biggest stage she wants. Let her turn all the lights on herself." "Why?" I asked. "Because," Evan said, backing out of the driveway, "the brighter the spotlight, the harder it is to hide who you really are. If she wants a show, Jasmine, we will give her one. Just promise me you will trust me when the curtain goes up." I trusted him with my life. I trusted him with my heart. So I ignored the knot in my stomach and agreed to the Maine wedding. I thought he was just being a compliant fiancé, trying to keep the peace with his future in-laws. I thought he was capitulating to the Romero family pattern. I had no idea that he was not surrendering. He was laying a trap, and he was letting Kelsey dig the pit herself, one aesthetic decision at a time. The transformation of Kelsey Romero in the month leading up to the wedding was a performance worthy of an Academy Award, after the initial tantrum at the dinner table where she secured the venue location. She pivoted. She became the model sister. She sent me color palettes. She texted me at 6 a.m. with ideas for floral arrangements that were cost-effective but high impact. She even insisted on being the maid of honor, a role I had hesitated to offer her, but one she claimed with such teary-eyed enthusiasm that my parents practically applauded her selflessness. "Look at her," my mother whispered to me one afternoon as Kelsey was aggressively fluffing the tulle on my dress during a fitting. "She is really trying. Jasmine, she wants this to be perfect for you." I wanted to believe it. There is a part of every scapegoated child that desperately craves the illusion of a normal family. I let my guard down. I let myself think that maybe, just maybe, the gravity of a wedding was enough to pull our family into a stable orbit, but I should have known better. In the Romero ecosystem, kindness is never free. It is a loan with high interest, and the collection notices always arrive when you are most vulnerable. The bill came due 2 weeks before the ceremony. We were at my parents' house for a logistics meeting. The mood was light. We were eating takeout Thai food. Kelsey waited until we were all relaxed, until my father had finished his beer and my mother was scrolling through Pinterest. So, Kelsey started, her voice pitching up into that breathless, excited tone she used for her TikTok intros. I have the most insane news, literally life-changing. She paused for effect. My parents looked up, beaming. I felt a cold prickle on the back of my neck. "What is it, honey?" my mother asked. "I got the email today," Kelsey said, clasping her hands. The brand trip. Yuzo Cosmetics is launching their fall line in Paris, and they invited me. They are flying out 10 top influencers for a 5-day luxury experience. "That is wonderful," my father said. "Congratulations, Kels." "It gets better," Kelsey said, her eyes sliding over to me for a split second before darting back to our parents. "Because my brand is all about family lifestyle right now. They offered a +3 package. They want to fly the whole family out. Business class, 5-star hotel near the Louvre, a private photographer for a family shoot at the Eiffel Tower. It is worth, like, $50,000. "Paris?" my mother gasped, her hand going to her chest. "Oh, Kelsey, that is a dream." "I know," Kelsey squealed. "We leave on the 12th. The room went dead silent. I put my fork down. The sound of the plastic hitting the takeout container seemed incredibly loud. "The 12th? I repeated. "Of this month?" "Yes," Kelsey said, still smiling, though the corners of her mouth were tight. "My wedding is on the 13th, I said. My voice was very calm. "In Maine." Kelsey let out a long, dramatic sigh, as if I had just pointed out a minor typo in a masterpiece novel. "I know, Jazz. Obviously I know. But listen, this is USO. This is the contract that could literally make my career. If I land this, I get the year-long ambassadorship. That is 6 figures. That is the money Dad needs to stabilize the business." She dropped that last part like a grenade. She knew exactly where to hit. My father's small logistics company had been struggling for 2 years. He had been stressed about cash flow. "We can't go to Paris on the 12th, I said, looking at my parents. "The rehearsal dinner is the night of the 12th. The wedding is the morning of the 13th. "Well," Kelsey said, inspecting her manicure, "I was thinking, the wedding is just a day, right? It is just a ceremony. We can do the legal stuff later, or we can move it. Maine is nice in the spring, too." "Move it?" I stood up. "Everything is booked. The vendors are paid. Evan's family is flying in." "Evan's family is like 3 people," Kelsey scoffed. "And the vendors? Who cares? We will lose a deposit. So what? This trip is worth $50,000. "Jasmine, are you really going to make me lose $50,000 and a career breakthrough because you want to wear a white dress on a specific Saturday?" I looked at my mother. "Mom?" My mother refused to meet my eyes. She was looking at the travel brochure Kelsey had conveniently pulled up on her tablet. "Jasmine," my mother said softly, "it is a very big opportunity for your sister. You know how hard she has been working." "I am getting married," I said. "In 2 weeks. We can have a celebration when we get back," my father added. He looked tired. "Kelsey says this could help the business. Jasmine, we have to be practical. Paris is a once-in-a-lifetime thing. You can get married any weekend." "You are choosing a vacation over my wedding," I stated. "It is not a vacation," Kelsey snapped, her mask of sweetness dropping instantly. "It is work. God, you are so selfish. You have always been selfish. You think the world revolves around you just because you found some guy to marry you. Some of us have to actually hustle for a living. You did not just get this email today, I said. The realization hit me with the force of a physical blow. Corporate trips aren't booked 2 weeks out. They need passport details. They need flight manifests. I walked over to the table where Kelsey's phone was sitting face up. She tried to grab it, but I was faster. I tapped the screen. The email from the airline was open. Booking confirmed, I read aloud. Date of purchase, September 28th. I looked up at them. You booked these tickets 3 weeks ago, before you even asked me. Before you pretended to be the maid of honor. Kelsey stood up, snatching the phone back. I had to secure the seats. If I waited for you to stop being a drama queen, I would have lost the slot. I was going to tell you. I just wanted to find the right time. So you were planning to skip the wedding the entire time you were helping me pick flowers, I said. You were lying to my face every single day. I was trying to manage your emotions, Kelsey shouted. Because you are hysterical. Look at you. I looked at my parents. They were not angry at her for lying. They were looking at me with annoyance, waiting for me to stop making a scene so they could go back to planning their trip to France. Fine, I said. Go. Don't be like that, my mother said. Come with us. We can ask the brand for one more ticket. Evan can come too. It could be a double celebration. No, I said. I am going to Maine. I am getting married. If you are there, great. If you are not, I guess I will know exactly where I stand. I grabbed my purse and walked out. I drove straight to Evan's house. I was shaking so hard I could barely put the key in the ignition. When I got there, I didn't cry. I was past crying. I told Evan everything. I told him about the trip, the lies, the accusation that I was the selfish one. Evan was sitting on his worn leather couch, cleaning a lens for one of his cameras. He listened without interrupting. He did not look surprised. They booked it 3 weeks ago? He asked, confirming the timeline. Yes. He nodded slowly. He set the camera lens down. Jasmine, he said. Do not fight them anymore. What? I looked at him, shocked. You want me to move the wedding? No, Evan said. I want you to let them do exactly what they want to do. If they want to go to Paris, let them go. Do not beg them to stay. Do not argue about the date. But they won't be there, I said. My parents won't walk me down the aisle. I know, Evan said. He reached out and took my hand. His grip was iron. It hurts. I know it hurts. But you have to let people show you who they are. If you force them to stay, they will just resent you for ruining their trip. Let them go. The rest leave the rest to me. What does that mean? It means, he said, kissing my knuckles, that I want our wedding to be honest. And if their empty chairs are the most honest thing about that day, then so be it. The week before the wedding was a surreal blur. My family was in a frenzy of packing and shopping for Parisian chic outfits, completely ignoring the fact that they were preparing to abandon me. They treated the wedding like a minor scheduling conflict I was stubbornly refusing to resolve. Then, 3 days before we were set to drive to Maine, I got an email. It was from a local media outlet I knew vaguely. Coastline Live. They did human interest stories, community news, and local events. Subject: media coverage. Inquiry: Romero Hartley. Wedding, dear Ms. Romero. We are currently producing a segment on sustainable love, featuring couples who are integrating eco-conscious practices into their lives. Given your fiancé's work with the local microgrid projects and the community focus of your ceremony, we would love to live stream the event and feature it as our weekend highlight. Please let us know if you would be open to this. We have cleared the initial logistics with Mr. Hartley's associate, Elena Vance. Sincerely, the production team. I stared at the screen. Elena Vance? I knew the name. I had seen it pop up on Evan's phone a few times. I assumed she was an admin for the nonprofit, or maybe a coordinator for the supply chain. But associate sounded formal. And why was Evan's associate clearing media logistics? I showed the email to Evan that night. What is this? I asked. Why does a news channel want to film our wedding? And who is Elena? Evan didn't flinch. He was stirring a pot of chili on the stove. Elena helps me with some of the organizational stuff for the community trust, he said smoothly. And as for the channel, I pulled a favor. A favor? You said you felt invisible, Evan said, turning to look at me. You said you felt like your family could just erase you. I thought maybe it would be nice to have a record, to have the town see us. The people we have actually helped. It is a community project, right? Let the community be part of it. It was a thin explanation, a line worker pulling a favor with a media outlet. But I was so exhausted, so emotionally drained by the war with my family, that I chose to accept it. It felt like he was trying to give me a win, trying to make the day feel significant even if my guest count was dropping by the hour. Okay, I said. As long as they don't get in the way. They won't, Evan promised. They will be invisible. We drove to Maine 2 days before the wedding. My family came in a separate car. The tension in the rental house was thick enough to choke on. They were physically present, but their minds were already checking into the Ritz Paris. On the night before the wedding, the house was filled with the sound of zippers. Not zippers on garment bags for tuxedos or bridesmaid dresses, zippers on heavy-duty suitcases. I walked past my parents' room. They were packing adapters and travel guides. I walked past Kelsey's room. She was on FaceTime with another influencer, talking about the best angles for photos at the Louvre. I went to my room and closed the door. I sat on the edge of the bed, feeling a profound sense of solitude. My phone buzzed. It was a text from Kelsey, sent from the room next door. She couldn't even be bothered to walk 10 feet to say it to my face. Don't be mad at us tomorrow. We have to do what is best for our future. You need to learn to live without family holding your hand eventually. This is good for you. Love you. Learn to live without family. I read the text twice. It should have broken me. It should have sent me running down the hall, screaming, begging them to stay, promising to pay them, promising to do anything just to not be alone at the altar. But as I stared at the glowing screen in the dark room, a strange calm settled over me. It was the same calm I felt when I was debugging a complex system and finally isolated the error. They were the error. I typed nothing back. I turned off the phone. I pulled the duvet up to my chin and closed my eyes. Down the hall, I heard them laughing about croissants. Outside, the ocean roared. I fell asleep instantly. I slept better than I had in years, because for the first time, I wasn't waiting for them to love me. I was just waiting for them to leave. The ceremony was set to take place on the lawn behind the main house, a stretch of manicured green that rolled right up to the granite cliffs overlooking the Atlantic. It was a day that defied the forecast. The fog had burned off completely, leaving behind a sky of piercing, relentless blue. The air smelled of salt spray and the wild lavender that grew in clumps along the perimeter of the property. I stepped out of the back door of the rental house at 10:45 in the morning. I was wearing my dress, a simple, structured silk crepe gown that lacked the lace and beadwork my mother had pushed for. It was clean. It was architectural. It was me. But as I stepped onto the grass, the first thing I saw was not the ocean. It was the chairs. We had set up 60 white folding chairs, arranged in 2 curved sections facing the floral arch. The arrangement was traditional. Groom's side on the right, bride's side on the left. The right side was full. There were people standing in the back because there were no seats left. I recognized faces from the town. Fishermen I had helped with generator permits. The librarian who ran the community center, the team from the installation crew in their Sunday best. There were also people I did not know, men in sharp suits and women in understated cashmere wraps who carried themselves with an air of quiet power. The left side, however, was a graveyard of white wood. 3 rows, 30 chairs, 28 of them were empty. Only 2 people sat on the bride's side. My college roommate, Sarah, who looked furious on my behalf, and her husband. Behind them, the rows were just blank, white lines cutting through the green grass. My parents' seats in the front row, reserved with little handwritten signs that said Mother of the Bride and Father of the Bride, were vacant. The wind caught the corner of the signs, making them flap frantically against the wood. I stopped at the top of the stone steps. The murmur of the crowd drifted up to me. It wasn't the joyful buzz of a wedding. It was the low, confused frequency of scandal. "Where are they?" I heard a woman whisper. "Is she an orphan?" "I heard the family had an emergency," someone replied. "No," another voice cut in, sharper. "I checked Instagram. They are eating croissants in the marais." The humiliation tried to rise up in my throat, hot and acidic. This was exactly what Kelsey wanted. She wanted me to look pathetic. She wanted the narrative to be poor Jasmine. Nobody loves her enough to stay. She wanted me to walk down that aisle with my head down, rushing to get it over with, a symbol of unwanted goods. I took a deep breath. I filled my lungs with the cold ocean air. I remembered the note in my pocket. "Figure it out yourself." I lifted my chin. I adjusted the strap of my dress. I was not going to run. "Jasmine," a voice came from beside me. I turned to see a woman standing in the shadow of the porch. She was tall, with steel gray hair cut into a sharp bob, and posture that made her look like a retired ballerina or a 4-star general. She was wearing a navy suit that probably cost more than my entire year's salary at Ridgeway. It was Rowan Hartley, Evan's aunt. I had only met her once. Briefly, via video call. Evan had told me she was the only family he really spoke to, the one who had raised him after his parents died. "Rowan," I said, my voice steady, "I am glad you made it." She stepped into the light. Her eyes were dark, like Evan's, but sharper. She looked past me at the empty chairs on the lawn, and her expression hardened. It was not pity I saw on her face. It was a profound, aristocratic disdain for the people who were missing. "Your fiancé tells me there has been a change in the guest list," she said. Her voice was crisp, lacking any chaotic emotion. "You could say that," I replied. "My family had a prior engagement in Paris." Rowan made a sound that was half laugh, half scoff. "Paris! How original!" She reached out and took my hand. Her skin was cool, her grip firm. She did not hug me. She did not offer me a tissue. She offered me something better: solidarity. "Listen to me," she said, squeezing my fingers. "Blood makes you related. Loyalty makes you family. Those empty chairs are not a reflection of your value. Jasmine, they are a reflection of their stupidity, and in my experience, stupidity should be highlighted, not hidden." She gestured toward the lawn. For the first time, I noticed something I had missed in my initial scan of the crowd. To the side of the altar, discreetly positioned behind some hydrangeas, was a camera crew, not a wedding videographer with a handheld stabilizer, a full professional broadcast crew. There were 3 cameras on tripods, a sound technician with a boom mic, and a production monitor tent. "What is that?" I asked, pointing. Rowan smiled. It was a dangerous smile. "Evan did not tell you the full scope. He requested permission to turn the ceremony into a fundraiser for the Coastal Resilience Project. He said that since we had the venue and the people, we might as well do some good." My mind raced. "A fundraiser?" "It is being live-streamed," Rowan said casually, "on Coastline Live, and because the network is an affiliate partner with the regional public broadcaster. The feed is being syndicated. We have about 10,000 viewers tuning in right now to support the Clean Energy Initiative." I froze. 10,000 people. The implication hit me like a physical wave. If this was being broadcast, it wasn't just a local news segment. The cameras were high definition. They were wide angle. They would see the ocean. They would see the flowers. They would see Evan. And they would see, with absolute, unblinking clarity, the 30 empty chairs on the left side of the aisle. "He knew," I whispered. "He suspected," Rowan corrected. "Evan is a man who prepares for every contingency. He told me that if your family showed up, the cameras would focus on the joy of unity, but if they did not." She let the sentence hang in the air. "If they did not," I finished, then the world sees exactly what they did. Precisely, Rowan said. So, my dear, you have a choice. You can walk down that aisle like a victim, and people will feel sorry for you. Or you can walk down there like a queen who just cleaned house, and people will respect you. Which is it going to be? I looked at the cameras. I looked at the empty seats. My family was in Paris right now, probably clinking glasses, thinking they had successfully staged a boycott that would ruin my day. They thought their absence would be a black hole that sucked all the light out of the event. But Evan had flipped the script. He had turned the lights up. He had turned their absence into a spotlight. I am ready, I said. Rowan squeezed my hand one last time. Good. Today, the Hartley house stands with you. You are never walking alone again. She released me and walked down the steps to take her seat in the front row on the right side. She did not sit on the groom's side. She walked deliberately across the aisle and sat in the empty chair marked Mother of the Bride. She sat down, crossed her legs, and stared straight ahead, daring anyone to challenge her. The music started. It was not the traditional wedding march. We had chosen a piece of cello music, something deep and resonant like the ocean. I walked down the steps. I stepped onto the white runner that cut through the grass. Usually, this is the moment where the bride looks for her father to take her arm. I stood there for a beat, letting the image sink in. A woman in white, standing solo against the backdrop of the sea. I started to walk. 1 step, 2 steps. The grass was soft under my heels. The wind whipped the skirt of my dress around my legs. The silence from the guests was absolute. No one was whispering anymore. They were witnessing something raw. I looked at the empty chairs as I passed them. I did not look away. I looked at the vacancy where my father should have been. I looked at the space where my mother should have been crying happy tears. I looked at the spot where Kelsey should have been standing, holding my bouquet. I felt a strange sense of detachment. Those chairs represented 26 years of begging for attention. Walking past them felt like walking out of a prison cell. I was leaving the need for their validation on the grass. I looked forward. Evan was standing at the altar. He was wearing a dark charcoal suit, tailored perfectly, a stark contrast to the flannel shirts I was used to. But it was his face that anchored me. He was not looking at the cameras. He was not looking at the guests. He was looking at me with a focus that made everything else blur. He did not look worried. He looked proud. When I reached the end of the aisle, I did not have a father to give me away. I stopped. I looked at Evan. I stepped forward on my own accord. I gave myself away. Evan reached out and took both my hands. His grip was warm, solid, real. "Hi," he whispered. "Hi," I breathed back. The officiant, a local judge who had known Evan for years, began the ceremony. He spoke about resilience. He spoke about how strong structures are built to withstand storms. Every word felt double-weighted, coded for the two of us. Then it was time for the vows. We had written our own. Evan went first. He promised to be my ground wire. He promised to protect the quiet moments. He promised that I would never have to audit his loyalty. Then it was my turn. I took the microphone. I turned slightly, not just to face Evan, but to face the room, to face the cameras, to face the empty chairs. My voice did not shake. "Evan," I began. "For a long time, I thought love was a transaction. I thought it was something you had to earn by being useful, by being silent, by making yourself small so others could feel big." I paused. The wind caught a strand of my hair. "I thought family was defined by blood," I continued. "But I learned something today. I learned that family is not the people who share your name. Family is not the people who leave when the itinerary gets better somewhere else." I looked directly into the lens of the center camera. I knew, with a certainty that defied logic, that somewhere in the universe, this signal would find them. "Family," I said, my voice ringing clear over the sound of the waves, "is the people who show up. Family is the people who stay when it is not convenient. You are my family, Evan, and today, I am choosing to build a new house with you, one where the doors are locked to people who treat love like a layover." There was a beat of silence, and then someone in the back started clapping. It was not polite applause. It was a slow, thunderous clap. Then another person joined in. Then another. Within seconds, the entire right side of the aisle, the fishermen, the engineers, the librarians, was on their feet. Rowan Hartley was standing, clapping with her hands high in the air. The applause rolled over me, louder than the ocean. It was not just for the wedding, it was a verdict. The community had seen the empty chairs, heard the words, and they had cast their vote. I looked at Evan. He was smiling. It was the same smile he had given me on the roof of the community center, the one that said, "I see you." "I do," I said, over the applause. "I do," Evan replied. He kissed me. It was not a performative kiss for the cameras. It was deep and desperate and claiming. In that kiss, I felt the final severance of the cord that had bound me to the Romeros. As we walked back down the aisle together, hand in hand, the camera crew panned to follow us. But I noticed something on the monitor in the tech tent as we passed. The director had set up a split shot. On one side was us, laughing, surrounded by petals thrown by the guests. On the other side of the screen, holding the shot for a lingering, brutal 5 seconds, was the image of the empty front row. The broadcast was live. The comments section on the side of the monitor was scrolling so fast it was a blur of text, even from a distance. I could catch the emojis, broken hearts, angry faces, fire. Who does that to their daughter? Look at those empty chairs. Best revenge is being happy. I squeezed Evan's hand. He squeezed back. "You okay?" he asked as we reached the end of the runner and stepped onto the path leading to the reception tent. "I am better than okay," I said, and I meant it. I looked back one last time at the garden. The empty chairs were still there, bright white scars on the green grass. But they didn't hurt anymore. They looked small. They looked insignificant. My family was in Paris, chasing a manufactured moment for an audience of strangers. I was here, in the salt air, holding the hand of a man who had turned a public humiliation into a coronation. The story had started with their exit, but as I walked into the reception, hearing the sound of a jazz band starting up and the laughter of people who actually wanted to be there, I knew the narrative had shifted. Kelsey thought she was the main character because she had the camera. She forgot that the villain always gets the most screen time right before the fall. And the fall was coming. I could feel it in the air, electric and inevitable, while I was dancing under a sailcloth tent in Maine, surrounded by the warmth of people who had chosen to be there. A very different scene was unfolding 3,000 miles away. I did not witness it in real time. Of course, I was too busy living my life to worry about the people who had exited it. But we live in an era where privacy is extinct and karma has a smartphone. Thanks to a 19-year-old study abroad student from Chicago and the ruthless efficiency of the TikTok algorithm, I, and 5 million other people, saw exactly how my family's Parisian dinner turned into an autopsy of their own greed. It was evening in Paris. My family had secured a table at a brasserie that was famous not for its food, but for its proximity to celebrity sightings. It was the kind of place where people wore sunglasses indoors and the menu did not list prices. They were seated on the terrace, surrounded by heat lamps and the buzz of international tourists, according to the footage that surfaced later. The mood at the table was high. They were celebrating. They had successfully abandoned the sinking ship of my wedding to board the luxury liner of Kelsey's career. They had champagne in an ice bucket. My mother was arranging oyster shells for a photo. My father looked relaxed, likely calculating how much the USO contract would offset his business debts. But Kelsey could not leave well enough alone. She could not just enjoy her victory. She needed to validate it by comparing it to my defeat. She wanted to see the small, sad gathering she imagined I was having. She wanted to see the lack of flowers, the cheap chairs, the foggy misery. She wanted to gloat. So, she propped her tablet up against the breadbasket. She connected to the restaurant Wi-Fi. She found the link to Coastline Live. "Let's just see," she was heard saying in the background of the video. I bet it is raining. I bet she is crying. She hit play. The stream was on a delay, so they were watching the ceremony just as it concluded. They did not see a sad, lonely girl. They saw the high-definition broadcast of a woman standing tall against a breathtaking Atlantic backdrop. They saw the drone shots of the cliffs. They saw the crowd of 60 people standing in an ovation that looked like a scene from a movie, and then the news anchor cut back to the studio for a commentary recap. The graphics package for the segment rolled across the bottom of the screen. The banner was bright blue and gold. It scrolled slowly, ensuring that no one could miss the information. Local resilience hero, Evan Hartley, CEO and founder of Hartley Horizon Energy, weds Jasmine Romero in coastal fundraiser. The camera that caught this moment was held by a girl at the next table. She had started filming because she recognized Kelsey from Instagram and wanted a spotted in the wild clip. She ended up capturing a Greek tragedy in the video. The reaction starts with my father. He was raising his glass. He froze. His eyes narrowed as he looked at the tablet screen. He squinted, as if trying to make the pixels rearrange themselves into something that made sense. "Hartley Horizon?" he whispered. The microphone on the student's phone picked it up clearly because the rest of the table had gone dead silent. He put his glass down. His hand was shaking. "Hartley Horizon Energy," he repeated, louder this time. He looked at my mother. "Barbara, that is the vendor. That is the proprietary grid contract." My mother looked confused. "What are you talking about? Evan is a mechanic. He fixes generators." "No," my father said, his voice rising to a panic. "No, I have been trying to get a meeting with the procurement director of Hartley Horizon for 6 months. If we get that supply chain deal, the business is saved. If we don't, we are insolvent by Christmas." He looked back at the screen, where a B-roll clip of Evan was playing. Evan was not wearing his flannel. He was wearing a hard hat, pointing at a massive offshore turbine array. With the text, net worth estimated, $40 million flashing briefly in a sidebar about his philanthropic trust. "He owns it," my father choked out. "The boy owns the whole damn grid." The color drained from my mother's face so fast she looked like she might faint. "He never said, he never told us." "Because we treated him like the help," my father hissed. "We let him carry the bags. We asked him to park the car, Barbara. We skipped his wedding to eat snails." And then, the focus shifted to Kelsey. Kelsey was not looking at the financial stats. She was looking at the comments section scrolling on the side of the live feed. She was reading what the world was saying about the empty chairs. What kind of trash family leaves a bride alone? The sister is that influencer Kelsey R., right? Unfollowing immediately. Imagine choosing a brand trip over this. Embarrassing. Kelsey's face turned a color I had never seen before. A mix of purple rage and white shock. The narrative she had carefully crafted, that she was the star and I was the burden, was disintegrating in real time. "He tricked me!" she screamed. She did not say it quietly. She shrieked it. Heads turned across the entire terrace. Waiters stopped with trays mid-air. "He lied!" Kelsey yelled, slamming her hand on the table. "He made me look stupid. He knew I wanted a rich husband. He knew it, and he hid it." In her fury, her hand struck the champagne flute. The glass tipped. It was full. The liquid was golden and sticky, and it splashed directly onto the lap of her white designer cocktail dress, the one she had bought specifically to outshine everyone in Paris. The stain spread instantly, turning the pristine fabric into a dark, wet mess. Kelsey stood up, gasping. She looked down at the dress, then at the tablet, then at her parents who were too paralyzed by their own financial terror to help her. "Do something!" she shrieked at them. "Fix this! He is ruining my brand!" That was the moment the American student zoomed in. The contrast was cinematic. On the tablet screen, visible in the shot, was the playback of me saying, "Family is the people who show up." I looked serene, dignified, and completely unbothered. In the foreground, Kelsey was covered in alcohol, her face twisted into a mask of ugly entitlement, screaming at her parents in the middle of a polite Parisian dining experience. The student posted the video to TikTok 5 minutes later. She captioned it with a sentence that would become the headline of the week. They ditched the bride for Paris and found out who she married. The internet moves faster than light. By the time I was cutting the cake in Maine, the video had 100,000 views. By the time I threw the bouquet, it had 1 million. The algorithm loves a villain, and Kelsey had just auditioned for the role of the century. The comments were brutal. People pieced it together instantly. They found the live stream of the wedding. They cross-referenced Kelsey's brand trip posts. They realized that the emergency she had vaguely alluded to was actually a lie. And then, the corporate gears started turning. Kelsey had tagged Uso Cosmetics in every single post leading up to the trip. She had made herself the face of their campaign. Now, that face was viral for all the wrong reasons. She was trending not as a beauty icon, but as the evil sister, around 3 a.m. Paris time, while my family was likely trying to sleep off the shock in their hotel rooms. The phone calls started, but they were not the calls they wanted. My father's phone rang first. It was not a client. It was the bank. Apparently, the automated systems had flagged the sudden international spending against the backdrop of his precarious business credit, but that was a minor headache compared to what happened to Kelsey. At 8 a.m, just as the sun was rising over the Seine, Kelsey received an email from the global PR director of Uso. She did not get a meeting. She did not get a warning. The email was 2 sentences long. Dear Ms. Romero, in light of recent viral media regarding your personal conduct and family values, which do not align with the Uso image of authentic connection, we are terminating your ambassadorship effective immediately. Please vacate the hotel suite by noon. The remainder of your stay will not be covered by the brand. They were kicked out. Kelsey tried to go live on Instagram to explain her side. She turned on the camera, teary-eyed, wearing a bathrobe, ready to spin a story about how I had manipulated the situation, how Evan was a liar who had deceived them. Guys, you do not understand, she sobbed into the camera. I am the victim here. He hid his money. That is financial abuse. The chat moved so fast it was unreadable, but the sentiment was clear. Go home. Kelsey, you left your sister alone at the altar. Gold digger tears. She lost 10,000 followers in the span of that 10-minute broadcast. But the most devastating blow didn't happen online. It happened in the lobby of the hotel as they were shamefully checking out, dragging their own bags because the concierge service had been revoked. My father saw a man reading a copy of the International Herald Tribune or some financial paper. The man was on the phone, speaking English. Yeah, the man said. Hartley Horizon. Stock is up 4% this morning. Apparently, the CEO got married and donated the whole wedding registry to the Coastal Grid Project. Great PR. The guy is a saint. My father stopped. He looked at the man. Then he looked at his wife and daughter. For 30 years, my father had chased success. He had worshipped it. He had sacrificed my self-esteem to groom Kelsey for it, believing she was the golden ticket. He had ignored the quiet, hard-working daughter because he didn't think I had any currency. And now, standing in a hotel lobby in France, holding a maxed-out credit card and a suitcase full of clothes he couldn't afford, he realized the truth. He had walked away from the very thing he had spent his life trying to find. He had been sitting at the same table with the solution to all his problems for 2 years, and he had treated him like a servant because he didn't drive a sports car. Kelsey was still crying about her dress. It is stained, she whined. Uso is going to make me pay for the cleaning. My father turned to her. For the first time in his life, he did not comfort her. He did not offer to pay. He looked at her with a look of absolute, terrifying clarity. Shut up, he said. Kelsey froze. What? I said shut up, my father said. His voice was hollow. We just lost everything. The contract, the reputation, the house, everything. But it is Jasmine's fault, Kelsey cried. She set us up. No, my father said, looking at the revolving doors of the hotel. She didn't set us up. She just let us go. He dragged his suitcase toward the door. Come on, We have to go to the airport. We are flying coach. And God help us when we land, because I don't think Evan Hartley is going to send a car." Kelsey stood there, the disgraced influencer, realizing for the first time that her tears had no exchange rate in the real world. She had hit a wall. It was a wall made of old money, quiet power, and the absolute indifference of people who do not need to shout to be heard. She had played a game of checkers against a grandmaster, and she hadn't even realized the board was set until she was already checkmated. Back in Maine, I was sitting by a fire pit with Evan, roasting marshmallows. I didn't know about the email. I didn't know about the hotel eviction. I just knew that my phone was blowing up with notifications. And for the first time in my life, I didn't feel the need to check them. I watched the sparks fly up into the night sky. "You think they know?" I asked Evan. He took a sip of his beer. "Oh, they know," he said. "The thing about the truth, Jasmine, is that it travels slowly, but when it arrives, it hits like a freight train." He was right. The train had arrived in Paris, and the wreck was spectacular. The 24 hours following the wedding were defined not by the joy of being a newlywed, but by the relentless, vibrating assault of my cellular device. We had stayed at the rental house for one extra day to decompress. I had turned my notifications off, but the screen kept lighting up like a strobe light in a nightclub. It sat on the coffee table, buzzing against the wood every 30 seconds. My mother called 8 times in 1 hour. Her voicemails started as frantic apologies. "We are so sorry. We got caught up in the moment," and evolved into guilt-ridden sobbing about how I was breaking the family apart by not answering. My father sent text messages that read like business memos. "Jasmine, we need to talk. There are implications here you do not understand. Call me immediately. We can fix this if we present a united front." He was not calling to congratulate me. He was calling to manage a crisis. He was calling because he had realized his daughter was now the wife of the man who held the keys to his company's survival. And then there was Kelsey. Her digital footprint was manic. She cycled through the 5 stages of grief in my inbox. First, there was denial. "Pick up. This is ridiculous." Then anger. "You ruined my career. Are you happy? You planned this to humiliate me." Then bargaining. "Jazz, please, just listen to me once. I will make a public apology video. I will say whatever you want. Just tell Evan to call Uso and get them to take me back." Then, finally, the begging. "I am your sister. Please, everyone hates me. I need you." I sat on the couch, staring at the names flashing on the screen. The urge to pick up was visceral. It was a reflex honed over 2 decades. When they called, I answered. When they needed fixing, I fixed. My thumb hovered over the green button when my mother called for the 9th time. Evan reached over and gently placed his hand over mine. He did not take the phone away. He just broke the circuit of my obedience. "You do not have to answer," he said softly. "If I don't answer," I said, my voice tight, "they will say, I am being cruel. They will spin this." "Let them spin," Evan said. "Silence is an answer. Jasmine. In fact, right now, it is the loudest answer you have. Every time you do not pick up, you are telling them that access to you is no longer a birthright. It is a privilege, and they lost it." I pulled my hand back. I let the phone ring until it went to voicemail. It felt like holding my breath underwater. Terrifying but strangely peaceful. They did not stay in Paris. With the hotel kicking them out and the internet sharpening its pitchforks, they booked the first flight back to Boston. They landed less than 30 hours after the wedding ceremony they had skipped. But Kelsey was not done fighting. She was a creature of the internet, and she believed that any narrative could be rewritten if you just posted enough content. Before they even left the airport, she posted a long, text-heavy story on Instagram. The background was a black screen. The font was white typewriter style. There has been a lot of misunderstanding about this weekend. Families are complicated. We love Jasmine more than anything. We are flying home to celebrate with her properly. The internet only sees 1 second of a long movie. Reunion coming soon. She was setting the stage. She was trying to frame their absence as a misunderstanding and my silence as a temporary glitch. She was preparing for a public reconciliation that would absolve her and make me look like the forgiving saint who welcomed the prodigal sister back. She tried to execute this plan the next afternoon. Evan and I were hosting a casual thank you lunch at a seafood shack near the harbor for the volunteers who had helped set up the wedding. It was low-key: lobster rolls, paper plates, plastic cups. We had not invited my family. We had not told them where we were, but in a small town. Locations are hard to hide. I was standing near the railing, talking to the librarian about the new solar panels for the community center, when I heard the gravel crunching in the parking lot. A car door slammed. I turned. My parents and Kelsey were walking toward the deck. They looked exhausted. My mother's eyes were puffy. My father looked gray. But Kelsey? Kelsey was camera-ready. She had done her hair. She was wearing a soft, pastel sweater that screamed innocent and remorseful. And in her hand, she held her phone, recording. She was live-streaming. She was going to ambush me. She was going to walk up, hug me, cry on my shoulder, and broadcast it to her followers to prove that we were fine, that she was forgiven, that the evil sister narrative was false. The conversation on the deck died. The volunteers put down their lobster rolls. Everyone watched as the Romero family marched toward the bride they had abandoned. Kelsey spotted me. Her face crumpled into a perfectly rehearsed expression of relief and love. "Jasmine," she cried out, her voice pitching up for the microphone. "Oh my God, Jasmine." She rushed toward me, arms wide open. She was coming in for the embrace. She was coming to use my body as a shield against the consequences of her actions. My instinct was to freeze. My instinct was to let her hug me to avoid a scene. But then I remembered the empty chairs. I remembered the note. "Figure it out yourself." I did not freeze. When Kelsey was 3 feet away, just as she was leaning in to wrap her arms around me, I stepped back. It was not a subtle shuffle. It was a deliberate, sharp step backward. Kelsey lunged into empty space, her arms wrapped around nothing but the salty air. She stumbled forward, catching herself on the railing to avoid falling. The silence that followed was absolute. Kelsey looked up at me, her eyes wide with shock. The phone in her hand was still recording, capturing her stumbling, capturing my refusal. "Jasmine," she whispered, forgetting the performance for a second. "What are you doing?" I looked at her. I did not look at the phone. "I am eating lunch," I said. My voice was calm. It was the voice I used when I was explaining a safety protocol violation to a junior technician. "You were not invited." "But we are family," Kelsey stammered, looking around at the crowd, looking for an ally. "We came to apologize. We came to fix this." "You came to film this," I corrected her, nodding at the phone. "Turn it off." "I am just documenting our healing," Kelsey protested, her voice rising to a whine. "Why are you being so cold? We made a mistake. Everyone makes mistakes." "A mistake is spilling coffee," I said. "Booking a trip to Paris 3 weeks before my wedding is a choice. You made your choice. Now I am making mine." I turned to my father. He was standing behind Kelsey, looking at Evan. He opened his mouth, probably to ask about the contract, about the business. "Don't," I said. "Do not speak to him about work. Do not speak to me about family. You forfeited that right when you got on that plane." "Jasmine, please," my mother sobbed. "We are your parents." "Then go be parents," I said. "Go home. Figure out how to pay your own bills, because I am done paying them with my dignity." I turned my back on them. I walked back to the librarian. "I am sorry," I said to her. "You were saying about the battery storage?" Behind me, I heard Kelsey let out a frustrated shriek. I heard my father muttering, and then, finally, I heard the car doors slam again and the sound of tires on gravel as they retreated. I did not turn around. That evening, back at Evan's house, the adrenaline finally crashed. I sat on the floor of the living room, leaning against the sofa. I felt hollowed out. I had stood my ground. Yes, But it is a terrible thing to have to amputate your own history. Evan came into the room. He was holding a file folder. He looked grim. He looked like he was holding something heavy. He sat down next to me. "You handled that well," he said. "I feel sick," I admitted. "I know," he said, "and I'm sorry. But I have to make it worse." I looked at him. "What?" "I ran a background check," Evan said. "Standard procedure for anyone marrying into the family, especially with the trust fund involved. I ran it on you. I ran it on your parents. And I ran it on Kelsey." He placed the file on the floor between us. "I got the full financial report back 2 days before the wedding," he said. "I didn't want to show you then. I didn't want to ruin the day. I thought maybe we could deal with it after the honeymoon. But after seeing them today, after seeing how desperate they are." He opened the folder. It was a credit report. But it wasn't his. It was mine. I looked at the summary page. My eyes scanned the lines. Total outstanding debt, $42,000. I frowned. "That is wrong. I have student loans. But they are down to $12,000. I pay them every month. I don't have credit card debt. I use a debit card." "Look at the breakdown," Evan said, pointing to the second page. I looked. There were 3 credit cards listed. Platinum rewards cards. High-interest lines of credit. Date opened. 6 months ago. Authorized user, Jasmine Romero. I stared at the transaction history. Delta Airlines. First class upgrade. Sephora, $300. The Ritz-Carlton, Boston, spa package, Revolve, $500. Uber Eats, $80. The list went on and on. It was a catalog of a lifestyle I did not live. It was a lifestyle of someone who needed to look rich for the internet. "Kelsey," I whispered. "She used your social security number," Evan said. His voice was cold, deadly. "She opened these cards in your name. She has been funding her influencer career with your credit score. That trip to Paris? The brand trip? She probably paid for the flights on these cards before she even got the invite, just to look like she was going." I felt the room spin. It wasn't just abandonment. It wasn't just narcissism. It was theft. My sister had stolen my identity. She had racked up $40,000 of debt in my name while I was saving coupons to pay for groceries. My parents, did they know? "The notifications were set to go to an old email address of yours," Evan explained. "One you probably haven't used since college." She covered her tracks. I looked at the transaction dates. There was a charge for a dress rental on the day I got fired from Ridgeway. There was a charge for a champagne brunch on the day I told them I was engaged. Every moment of my pain was a shopping spree for her. I closed the folder. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. The hollow feeling in my chest vanished, replaced by something cold and hard and incredibly sharp. For years, I had thought I was fighting a family dynamic. I thought I was fighting for love, but I wasn't. I was fighting a parasite. "She committed fraud," I said. "Yes," Evan said. "Wire fraud, identity theft. Given the amount, it is a felony." I looked at the folder. That paper trail was not just debt. It was leverage. It was a weapon. "She thinks I am just the little sister," I said softly. "She thinks I am just hurt feelings and sad wedding photos. She thinks she can just apologize and I will melt." I stood up. I picked up the folder. "She has no idea what I am," I said. I walked over to the desk where I kept my laptop. I sat down. I opened a spreadsheet. "What are you doing?" Evan asked. "I am an engineer." "Evan," I said, opening the credit report file. "I look for patterns. I look for anomalies. And when I find a breach in the system, I don't just patch it." I started typing. Date, amount, merchant, location. "I trace the source," I said, "and I terminate the connection." I looked at Evan. "Do not call the lawyer yet. I want to build the full timeline. I want to match every single one of her Instagram posts to these charges. I want to prove that every time she smiled for the camera, she was stealing from me." "And then?" Evan asked. "And then," I said, typing a number into the cell, I am going to give her exactly what she wanted. I am going to make her famous. I worked through the night. I didn't feel tired. I felt like I was finally, after 26 years, writing the correct code for the Romero family. And this time, there would be no bugs. There would be no errors. There would only be a total system reset. The shift from emotional devastation to cold. Legal strategy happened in a conference room on the 42nd floor of a building in downtown Boston. The view from the window was spectacular, offering a panoramic look at the city, but inside the room, the atmosphere was sterile and quiet. There was no screaming here. There were no tearful Instagram stories. There was only the soft scratch of a fountain pen against paper and the hum of a high-end air filtration system. Evan did not engage in a Twitter war with Kelsey. He did not post cryptic quotes about loyalty. When Kelsey's followers began spamming his company's social media accounts with accusations of elitism and financial bullying, Evan simply turned off the comments section. "We do not fight in the mud. Jasmine," he told me as we rode the elevator up, "when you wrestle a pig, you both get dirty, but the pig likes it. We are going to handle this the way adults handle it, with the law." Our lawyer was a man named Arthur Sterling, a specialist in white-collar crime and reputation management. He did not look like a shark. He looked like a grandfather who played chess in the park, but his eyes were sharp enough to cut glass. He had the credit report I had compiled, along with a stack of additional documents his team had subpoenaed in the last 48 hours. "Mrs. Hartley," Arthur said, sliding a document across the mahogany table. "Your husband asked us to look into the specifics of the trip sponsorship. We found something interesting." I looked at the paper. It was a copy of the application form submitted to Uso Cosmetics for the Parisian family experience. "Look at the contact email," Arthur instructed. I scanned the line. Jasmine Romero, official gmail.com. "That is not my email," I said. "I have never used that address." "We know," Arthur said. "We traced the creation of the account. It was created from an IP address associated with a smartphone registered to Kelsey Romero. She used this email to correspond with the brand. She accepted the terms and conditions on your behalf, and she signed the liability waiver and the financial guarantee." "Financial guarantee?" I asked. "The brand covers the flights and hotel," Arthur explained. "But they require a credit card on file for incidentals and a guarantee of solvency in case the influencer breaches the contract or damages property. Kelsey does not have the credit score to qualify, so she listed you as the financial guarantor. She forged your digital signature." I felt a wave of nausea. She hadn't just stolen my money. She had legally tethered me to her behavior. If she had trashed that hotel room, Uso would have sued me, not her. "This is identity theft, plain and simple," Arthur said, removing his reading glasses. "And because she used the internet to transmit these fraudulent documents across state lines and international borders. It falls under federal jurisdiction. We are not talking about a slap on the wrist. We are talking about prison time." I sat back in the leather chair. Prison. My sister. The thought was heavy. Suffocating. "Do we have to go that far?" I asked, my voice small. "Can't we just force her to pay it back?" Evan turned his chair toward me. "Jasmine, look at this." He opened another file. "While we were digging, we found that she has already hired a crisis management firm. A cheap one, but aggressive." He slid a tablet toward me. On the screen was a draft of an article from a gossip site, set to be published in 3 hours. "The Cinderella Myth: How Jasmine Romero Married a Billionaire and Forgot Where She Came From." The article was vicious. It claimed that I had cut off my struggling family the moment I got a taste of money. It claimed that my parents were on the verge of bankruptcy and I refused to help them, choosing instead to throw a lavish exclusionary wedding where they were not welcome. It painted Kelsey as the devoted daughter trying to keep the family afloat while the Ice Queen sister looked down on them from her ivory tower. "She is trying to destroy you," Evan said calmly. "She knows she is in trouble. So she is trying to win the court of public opinion before the legal court can touch her. She wants to make you too afraid of the backlash to press charges. She thinks if she screams loud enough, we will back down, Arthur added. It is a common tactic. The poor shout. The guilty shout. The innocent and the powerful, they simply present the evidence. The door to the conference room opened. A paralegal stepped in. Mr. Hartley? Your father-in-law is in the lobby. He says it is an emergency. My father. Here. I looked at Evan. Did you invite him? No, Evan said. But he knows who handles his contracts. He knows where the power grid operates. Send him in, I said. My father looked 10 years older than he had on the live stream. His suit was rumpled. He looked like a man who hadn't slept in 3 days. When he saw me, he didn't hug me. He didn't yell. He looked at Evan with a terrifying mix of fear and reverence. Evan, my father said, ignoring me entirely. We need to talk about the supply chain contract, the Ridgeway integration. This is not a business meeting. Mr. Romero, Evan said. He didn't stand up. It has to be, my father pleaded. Stepping forward. I just got a notice from your procurement division. They put a hold on our application. A hold. Evan, you know we need that advance. If we don't get the sign-off by Friday, payroll bounces. I know, Evan said. Then fix it, my father said, his voice cracking. We are family. You can't let my business fail because of some wedding drama. It is not wedding drama, Evan said. It is a compliance issue. Compliance? My father looked confused. Our logistics are perfect. Our safety rating is gold standard. It is not about safety, Evan said. He picked up a thick document from the table, the standard supplier agreement for Hartley Horizon Energy. He flipped to page 42. Clause 18, Evan read aloud, the moral turpitude and ethical standing clause. Hartley Horizon reserves the right to terminate or refuse any contract with a vendor whose principal officers engage in conduct that involves fraud, dishonesty, or public actions that bring disrepute to the community. My father went pale. What? That is boilerplate legal jargon. That is for CEOs who get caught laundering money, or for families who commit wire fraud, Evan said, closing the binder. We have evidence that a member of your immediate household, a dependent you claim on your taxes, has committed multiple felonies involving identity theft and forgery, and we have evidence that you, as the head of the household, may have been aware of her financial instability and enabled it. I didn't know, my father protested. I swear, Evan, I didn't know she used Jasmine's name. But you knew she didn't have the money for Paris, I cut in. My father flinched. He looked at me for the first time. Jasmine, he said, his voice dropping to a whisper. Please, don't do this. She is your sister. She is sick. She needs help, not a criminal record. If you let Evan file these charges, it will kill your mother. It will destroy the family name. The family name is already destroyed, I said. Kelsey destroyed it when she live-streamed her tantrum in a French restaurant. We can fix it, my father begged. She will apologize. We will pay you back. I will sign a promissory note. Just tell Evan to release the hold on the contract and drop the lawsuit. Please, for the sake of the family. Drop the lawsuit, I repeated. So she gets away with it again, just like she got away with the laptop, just like she got away with everything. She is young, my father said, falling back on the oldest excuse in the book. She made a mistake. She is 28 years old, I said, and she tried to frame me as a villain to 5 million people. I looked at Evan. He was waiting for me. He held the power to save my father's business with a single signature. He held the power to bury Kelsey with a single filing, but he was letting me choose. The contract, I asked Evan. Does the ethics clause give you veto power? Absolute veto power, Evan said. I can block any vendor I deem a risk to the company's integrity. I turned back to my father. You want the contract, I said. You want to save the business. Yes, my father breathed. Yes, Jasmine. It is everything we have worked for. Then you have to choose, I said. You can have the contract, or you can have Kelsey's protection. You cannot have both. What do you mean? If you want the deal with Hartley Horizon, I said, my voice steady, you have to cooperate with the investigation. You have to go on record stating that you did not authorize her actions. You have to stop shielding her. My father looked at me with horror. You want me to rat out my own daughter? I want you to tell the truth, I said. For once in your life, I want you to choose justice over the golden child. My father stood there for a long time. He looked at the window. He looked at the expensive carpet. He looked at the looming bankruptcy that was days away. Then, he looked at Evan. Where do I sign? My father asked. I felt a piece of my heart break off and dissolve. He didn't do it because it was right. He did it because he needed the money. But at that moment, I didn't care about his motives. I just needed the truth. We didn't announce anything. Evan didn't call a press conference. He simply had Arthur Sterling walk the file over to the district attorney's office. The beauty of the legal system is that it does not care about your follower count. It does not care about your aesthetic. It cares about data. 2 days later, Kelsey was called in for questioning. We weren't there, but Arthur gave us the transcript later. It was pathetic. She tried to play the confused girl card. She batted her eyelashes at the detectives. She claimed it was all a big misunderstanding, that I had verbally authorized her to use the cards and the email, and that I was now lying because I was jealous of her Paris trip. I see, the detective had said. So, Mrs. Hartley authorized you to create a fake email address using a burner phone that pings to your bedroom location at 3 a.m? Kelsey had frozen. And, the detective continued, did she also authorize you to access her credit monitoring service and change the notification settings so she wouldn't see the alerts? Because we have the server logs from Equifax, and the login came from your MacBook Pro. Kelsey started to cry, but these weren't the cute tears she cried on TikTok. These were the ugly, terrified tears of a narcissist who realizes the mirror has shattered. She admitted to borrowing the identity. She called it borrowing. She said she intended to pay it back once the USO sponsorship money came in. She didn't seem to understand that spending $40,000 of someone else's money without permission isn't borrowing. It is theft. But the real twist, the one that made me physically ill, came when Arthur was reviewing the subpoenaed bank records from my parents' joint account. We were back in the conference room. The sun was setting, casting long shadows across the table. Jasmine, Arthur said gently, there is one more transaction you need to see. He pointed to a line item dated 2 days before the trip to Paris. Wire transfer, $15,000. Recipient, Kelsey Romero. Memo, Paris. Have fun. I stared at the numbers. $15,000. My father had just told me the business was on the brink of collapse. He had told me they couldn't afford to help with my wedding. He had told me they were struggling. But they had $15,000. They had $15,000. And they didn't give it to the business. They didn't offer it to me to help with the catering. They gave it to Kelsey. They gave her $15,000 to go on a trip that was explicitly designed to overshadow my wedding. The memo line killed me. Paris. Have fun. It wasn't a business investment. It wasn't a loan. It was a gift given in secret, right before they packed their bags to leave me. I looked up at Evan. He was reading my face. He saw the exact moment the last thread of hope snapped. They funded it, I whispered. They didn't just go along with her. They paid for it. They paid for the ticket to abandon me. Evan stood up. He walked over to me and knelt down so he was eye level with the chair. They made their investment, he said, his voice low and fierce. Now they have to live with the return. I looked at the wire transfer again. It was the smoking gun. It proved that my parents weren't victims of Kelsey's manipulation. They were her co-conspirators. They had looked at their 2 daughters, looked at their limited resources. And they had bet everything on the pretty one who promised them fame. They had bet against me. "File it," I said to Arthur. "File all of it, the wire transfer, the credit fraud, the forgery. Include my parents in the discovery motion. If they paid for the crime, they can explain it to a judge." "Are you sure?" Arthur asked. "Once we file this, it becomes public record. The press will find it. This will not just be a scandal, it will be an annihilation." I stood up and walked to the window. I looked down at the city lights, thousands of them blinking in the dark. "Rich people don't scream." "Arthur," I said, repeating the lesson I had just learned. "They just turn on the lights." "Turn them on," I said. "Turn them all on." I walked out of the office without looking back. I left the crying, the begging, and the guilt in that room. I walked into the elevator with my husband, and as the doors closed, I felt lighter than I had in my entire life. The trap had been sprung, and for the first time, I wasn't the one caught in it. The venue for the Women Who Build Summit was a cavernous convention center in the Seaport District of Boston. It was a serious event. The attendees were not influencers or brand ambassadors. They were CEOs, architects, city planners, and venture capitalists. These were women who dealt in steel, concrete, and capital. I had been invited to speak not because of my engineering portfolio at Ridgeway, but because of a 15-second clip of my wedding vows that had been viewed 20 million times. The organizers wanted me to talk about emotional infrastructure. They wanted to know how a woman stands tall when the foundation beneath her collapses. I stood backstage, adjusting the cuffs of my blazer. I had chosen my outfit with forensic precision. There was no white lace. There was no softness. I wore a tailored navy suit that looked like armor. I wore no jewelry except for my wedding band and the vintage watch Evan had given me, a Patek Philippe that kept perfect time. A reminder that every second I wasted on the past was a second I stole from my future. Evan was standing in the shadows of the wings. He was not going out there with me. He knew this battle had to be fought solo. "They are in the front row," he said quietly. I nodded. We had seen the guest list. Kelsey had managed to scrape together the last of her dwindling credit, or perhaps my father had liquidated a retirement account, to buy 3 VIP tickets. They cost $2,000 each. "She thinks she has me cornered," I said. "She thinks you are polite," Evan corrected. "She relies on your training. She thinks you will not make a scene in front of 5,000 people." "I am not going to make a scene," I said, checking the clasp of my watch. "I am going to make a statement." The stage manager gave me the cue. "Ms. Romero, you are up." I walked out. The lights were blindingly bright, hot against my skin. The applause was polite, curious. I walked to the podium. I did not hide behind it. I took the microphone off the stand and walked to the edge of the stage. I looked down. There they were. They were sitting in the center of the front row, directly in my line of sight. My mother was wearing a somber, muted dress, clutching a tissue. My father looked at the floor. And Kelsey? Kelsey was glowing. She was wearing a white dress, an aggressive choice, and looking up at me with eyes that were already shimmering with unshed tears. She had her phone propped up on her purse, the camera lens facing the stage. She was ready for the climax of her redemption arc. She was ready for me to look down, see my family, break into tears, and welcome them back into the fold. She was ready to rush the stage, hug me, and caption the video, "Love Always Wins." I let the silence stretch. 5 seconds, 10 seconds. The room went quiet. "They asked me to come here today to talk about resilience," I began. My voice was low, amplified clearly through the high-end sound system. "They asked me to talk about the day I got married alone." I saw Kelsey nod encouragingly. She was mouthing something. "I love you." "But to understand that day," I continued, "you have to understand the 26 years that came before it. You have to understand what it is like to be the scaffolding that someone else stands on." I walked along the edge of the stage. I looked at the audience. but I was speaking to the front row. I grew up in a house where love was a limited resource, I said. It was a commodity. If you were shiny, if you were loud, if you could be monetized, you got the love. If you were quiet, if you were the one fixing the leaks and paying the bills, you got the silence. The room was deadly still. This was not the motivational speech they expected. For years, I let myself be the villain in their story so they could be the heroes, I said. I took the blame for mistakes I did not make. I paid debts I did not owe. I let them use my name, my reputation, and my sanity as collateral for a life they could not afford. Kelsey's smile faltered. She shifted in her seat. This was not the script. 2 weeks ago, I said, my family chose to go to Paris instead of my wedding. You all saw the empty chairs. You saw the viral video. But what you did not see was the machinery behind those empty chairs. I paused. I looked directly at Kelsey. You did not see the credit cards opened in my name to fund that trip, I said. A gasp rippled through the auditorium. It was a sharp, collective intake of breath. Kelsey froze. Her face went pale. You did not see the forged signatures on the liability waivers, I continued, my voice rising just slightly. You did not see the wire transfer from my parents' joint account, money that should have saved their business, sent to fund a vacation designed to humiliate me. My father's head snapped up. He looked terrified. We like to think that family is a sacred bond, I told the crowd. We are taught that blood is thicker than water, but sometimes blood is just a biological accident, and sometimes the people who share your DNA are the ones holding the knife. Kelsey stood up. It was a desperate move. She knew she was losing the narrative. She knew the audience was turning against her. She had to interrupt. She had to reclaim the visual. Jasmine, she cried out. Her voice was shrill, cutting through the tension. Jasmine, please, we love you. We just want to talk. She stepped into the aisle. She opened her arms. She started walking toward the stairs that led up to the stage. The audience murmured. Some people looked uncomfortable. Was this part of the show? Was this a reunion? Kelsey was crying now. Big, theatrical sobs. I am sorry, Jasmine. Just let me hug you. We can fix this. She reached the bottom of the stairs. She put one foot on the first step. Stop, I said into the microphone. It was a command, not a request. Kelsey hesitated. She looked up at me, her face wet with tears, her arms still outstretched. Jazzy, please, I am your sister. You are not my sister right now, I said. You are a defendant. At that exact moment, a man in a dark suit stepped out from the side of the stage. He was not security. He was a process server. We had timed this. We knew she would try to make contact. We knew she would try to force a public reconciliation to invalidate the legal case. The man stepped in front of Kelsey, blocking her path to the stage. He held out a thick envelope. Kelsey Romero? He asked. His voice was not amplified, but in the silence of the room, everyone heard it. Kelsey looked at him, confused. What? Move. I am trying to see my sister. You are being served, the man said. This is a formal notice of a civil lawsuit for identity theft, fraud, and damages, and this, he handed her a second paper, is a restraining order granted this morning by the Suffolk County Court. You are legally required to stay 500 feet away from Mrs. Hartley. Kelsey looked at the papers, then she looked at the camera she had left propped on her purse, then she looked at me, and the mask fell. It happened in a split second, but because of the giant screens flanking the stage, 5,000 people saw it. The tearful, pleading face of the loving sister vanished. In its place was a snarl of pure, unfiltered hatred. Her lip curled. Her eyes narrowed into slits of venom. She looked like a cornered animal realizing the trap had snapped shut. She slapped the papers out of the man's hand. You bitch! She screamed at me. You think you are better than me? You are nothing. I made you famous. You owe me. The microphone caught every word. The illusion of the misunderstood family evaporated instantly. I stood there, looking down at her. I did not flinch. I did not look angry. I looked at her with the clinical detachment of a scientist observing a volatile reaction. "I don't owe you anything," I said. "Not my money, not my time, and certainly not my stage." Security guards moved in then, flanking Kelsey and my parents. My father was trying to pull Kelsey back, his face a mask of mortification. My mother was weeping into her hands, but nobody was looking at her with sympathy anymore. They were looking at her with judgment. I raised the microphone one last time. "Apologies do not erase consequences," I said to the silent room. "And biology does not exempt you from responsibility. You can be a victim, or you can be a survivor. But you cannot be both while you are still holding the weapon." I signaled to the security team. "Please remove them." Kelsey was screaming as they dragged her out. She was shouting about how unfair it was, about how I had married a billionaire and forgotten my roots. But nobody was listening. The audience was on their feet. They started clapping. It wasn't the polite applause from the beginning. It was a roar. It was the sound of 5,000 women who had carried their own dead weight, who had forgiven too much for too long. Recognizing someone who finally put the burden down. I watched them go. I watched the back of my father's suit jacket disappear through the exit doors. I finished my speech. I don't remember exactly what I said after that, but I know I spoke about building things that last, structures, families, self-worth. I walked off the stage to a standing ovation. Evan was waiting for me. He didn't say anything. He just handed me a bottle of water and held the door open. We walked out the back exit to the loading dock where the car was waiting. The air outside was cool and smelled of the harbor. "Jasmine," I stopped. My father was standing near the loading bay. He had evidently shaken off the security team or waited outside. He looked small. The arrogance was gone. The desperation was gone. He just looked like an old, defeated man. Evan stepped in front of me, but I put a hand on his arm. "It is okay." I looked at my father. He looked at the ground. Then he looked at me. His eyes were red. "I didn't know about the credit cards," he said. His voice was shaking. "I knew about the money for the trip. I knew we shouldn't have gone. But I didn't know she stole your name." "Does it matter?" I asked. He flinched. "Yes, it matters. I am your father." "You were my father when you let me take the fall for the Ridgeway hack," I said. "You were my father when you watched me walk down the aisle alone on a live stream. You don't get to be my father only when the indictment comes down." He took a step forward. "I was wrong," he whispered. "Jasmine, I was wrong. About everything. About her. About you." It was the sentence I had waited 20 years to hear. I was wrong. I had fantasized about this moment. I had imagined that hearing those 3 words would fix everything, that it would heal the little girl inside me who just wanted to be good enough. But as I stood there, listening to him, I felt nothing. No relief, no joy, no anger. It was just a fact, a piece of data arriving too late to be useful. "I know you were," I said. "Can we?" He gestured vaguely. "Can we start over? I will testify against her. I will do whatever you want. Just don't cut us out completely." I looked at his hands. They were shaking. He wasn't asking for a relationship. He was asking for a lifeline. He was drowning. And he realized I was the only boat left in the water. "You aren't cut out, Dad," I said gently. "You are just where you chose to be. You are in Paris. Remember?" "Jasmine." "Goodbye, Dad," I said. I turned around. I got into the car. Evan got in beside me. I watched my father through the tinted glass as we drove away. He stood on the concrete loading dock, getting smaller and smaller until he was just a gray speck against the brick wall. I turned my head and looked forward. "Are you okay?" Evan asked. "Yes," I said, and for the first time, I realized I wasn't just saying it. The reunion she planned had happened, the audience had seen the truth, the apology had been delivered, and I had left it all on the loading dock, right next to the trash. The weeks following the summit were a slow, grinding dismantle of the life Kelsey Romero had built. There were no more viral outbursts. There were no more tearful appeals to the camera. The legal system acts like a vacuum. It sucks the air out of the room until all the noise stops, leaving only the hard, cold facts on the table. We met one final time in Arthur Sterling's office to finalize the settlement. Kelsey sat on the opposite side of the table. She looked smaller. The designer clothes were gone, replaced by a generic business casual outfit that she probably bought at a discount store. Her hair was pulled back in a severe ponytail, and she wore no makeup. She looked like a stranger. The terms were non-negotiable. Evan had structured them that way. There would be no prison time. Provided she adhered to a strict restitution plan, every credit card opened in my name was closed. The debt was transferred to her personal liability. She was required to pay back the $42,000, plus legal fees, on a monthly schedule that would likely keep her in debt for the next decade. But the real punishment was the silence. Part of the agreement was a permanent injunction against using my name, my image, or any reference to the Hartley family for commercial gain. She had to scrub her social media. She had to delete the photos. She had to dismantle the brand she had built on my back. She signed the papers with a shaking hand. She didn't look at me. She didn't look at Evan. She just looked at the ink drying on the page, realizing that she had signed away her relevance. When she stood up to leave, she paused at the door. "What am I supposed to do now?" she asked. Her voice was thin, stripped of all its former arrogance. "I don't have a degree. I don't have a resume. All I had was the following." "You have your health," Evan said, not looking up from his file. "And you have the truth. I suggest you start using both." She walked out. The door clicked shut. It was the quietest exit she had ever made. A month later, Evan drove me out to the coastal site where we had first met. The microgrid project was fully operational now. The solar arrays were gleaming in the afternoon sun, and the wind turbines were turning lazily against the blue sky. But Evan didn't take me to the control room. He took me to a new building that had just been completed near the entrance of the facility. It was a training center. "I wanted to show you this before the press release goes out," Evan said, stopping in front of a bronze plaque mounted on the brick wall. I read the inscription, "The Romero Integrity Fund, dedicated to supporting young engineers who build with principle." I felt my throat tighten. "You named it Romero?" "I did," Evan said, "because the name shouldn't belong to the people who tarnished it. It should belong to the one who redefined it." He walked me inside. The lobby was filled with photos of the first class of recipients. They were young kids from vocational schools, students from underfunded districts, people who had the talent but not the safety net. "Full tuition," Evan explained, "plus a living stipend, but there is a catch. To keep the scholarship, they have to pass a rigorous ethics review every semester. No shortcuts, no borrowing work, no leveraging connections. If they lie, even once, they are out." I touched the wall where the mission statement was painted. "Integrity is the currency of the future." "It is beautiful, Evan," I said. "But my parents, they are going to hate this." "They already know," Evan said. "Your father called me yesterday." I turned to him. "He did?" "He saw the announcement in the trade papers. He thought well. He thought that because we used the family name, it meant the door was open again." I let out a bitter laugh. Of course he did. My father viewed everything as a transaction. If I put his name on a building, surely I would put my money in his bank account. "What did he ask for?" "The usual," Evan said. "He asked for a consulting contract. He said the logistics business is dead in the water without the Hartley deal. He said they are going to lose the house in Kennebunkport. He asked if I could just float them a loan from the foundation's endowment. He called it a family allocation." "And what did you say?" Evan took my hand. "I told him that the fund is a charitable trust. It is illegal to use it for personal enrichment. I told him that every dollar in this building is for people who have proven they can build something honest." "He must have screamed," I said. "He begged," Evan corrected. "He said, 'Evan, you can't punish us forever. We are flesh and blood.' And I told him, 'I am not punishing you. Mr. Romero, Punishing you would be suing you for the $15,000 you wired to Kelsey. I am simply not rewarding you for the mistake of thinking I was stupid." I looked at the photos of the students again. They looked hopeful. They looked hungry. They looked like I did 10 years ago. "They are going to lose the house," I said softly. "Yes," Evan said. "They will probably have to downsize. They will have to live like normal people. They will have to figure it out." "Figure it out yourself," the phrase echoed in my mind. "Good," I said. We walked back outside. The sun was beginning to set, casting long orange shadows across the pavement. I saw a figure standing near the edge of the property. Looking at the donor wall, it was Kelsey. She looked different than she had in the lawyer's office. She was wearing a uniform, a light blue polo shirt with the logo of a local hospitality staffing agency. She looked tired. She had probably just finished a shift at one of the hotels down the road, maybe even the same hotel where she had once demanded a suite upgrade. She heard our footsteps and turned around. For a moment, nobody said anything. The wind whipped her hair across her face. She didn't try to fix it. She didn't pull out a phone. "I saw the sign," she said, gesturing to the building. "Romero Integrity Fund. That is funny." "It is accurate," I said. She let out a short, dry laugh. "Dad is losing his mind. You know, he says you did this to mock him. He says you put the name up there just to remind him of what he can't touch." "I put the name up there for the students," I said. "Dad is not part of the equation anymore." Kelsey looked at the wall again. She traced the letters of our last name with her finger. Her fingernails were bare, no longer tipped with the expensive acrylics she used to flaunt. "I applied," she said quietly. I stared at her. "What?" "I applied for a job here," she said. "Administrative assistant, front desk, whatever. I saw the listing online. I thought maybe since it is family." "Kelsey," I said. "I know," she interrupted. "I got the rejection email this morning. Automated system. Candidate does not meet the ethical qualifying standards. That is you, isn't it? You put a block on my social security number. The system put a block on you," Evan said, stepping forward, "because you have a record of financial fraud." "It is an algorithm, Kelsey. It doesn't care who your sister is. It just protects the assets." She looked at him, then back at me. Her eyes were wet, but she wasn't crying. It was a look of resignation. She finally understood that the rules applied to her. "Did you do this to forgive?" she asked. "Is this your way of saying that if I work hard enough, if I scrub enough floors, I can come back in? Is this a test?" I looked at her. I looked at the sister I had worshipped when I was 5, the sister I had covered for when I was 12, the sister I had paid for when I was 26. "No," I said. "I did not do this to forgive." "Then why?" she asked. "Why keep the name? Why not just erase us?" "I did it to remember I escaped," I said. The words hung in the cold air. "I need to see the name," I continued, "to remind myself that it does not define me anymore. It is just a word on a wall. It has no power over me, and neither do you." Kelsey looked down at her work boots. She kicked at a piece of gravel. "You were always better than me," she whispered. It was the first honest thing she had said in her entire life. Her voice cracked. "You were smarter. You were stronger. I hated you for it." "No," I said firmly. "I wasn't better than you. Kelsey, I was just as scared. I was just as lonely." "Then what was the difference?" she asked, looking up with genuine confusion. "I just stopped asking for permission," I said. "I stopped waiting for you to tell me I was allowed to be happy. I stopped waiting for Dad to tell me I was allowed to be successful. I just did it." She nodded slowly. She understood. She finally understood that the cage she was in was one she had built herself, bar by bar, with every lie she told. "I have to go," she said. "My bus is coming." "Goodbye, Kelsey," I said. She turned and walked away toward the main road. She didn't look back. She walked with a slight limp, maybe from being on her feet all day. maybe from the weight of the reality she was finally carrying. I watched her go until she disappeared around the bend. "Are you ready?" Evan asked. "One more thing," I said. I reached into my bag. I pulled out a small steel box. It was a lockbox, heavy and cold. I opened it. Inside lay two things. The first was my marriage certificate. The paper was crisp, bearing the official seal of the state of Maine, witnessing the union between Jasmine Romero and Evan Hartley. It represented the future. It represented a choice made in freedom and love. The second item was an envelope. The edges were worn. The white paper was slightly crumpled. It was the note from the kitchen table. "Figure it out yourself." I looked at the handwriting one last time. For so long, those words had felt like a curse. They had felt like a slam of the door. But now, looking at them next to the certificate, I saw them differently. They were an instruction, and I had followed it. I had figured it out. I had figured out that I didn't need them. I had figured out that my worth wasn't a negotiation. I placed the envelope back in the box, right next to the marriage license. "One is a departure," I said to Evan. "One is an arrival." I closed the lid. I locked it. "Let's go home," I said. We drove back to our house, our real house, not a rental. It was a small place on the cliffs, overlooking the water. It didn't have a gate. It didn't have a security team. It just had warm lights in the windows and a chimney puffing smoke. That night, we sat on the deck, wrapped in a blanket, listening to the waves crash against the rocks below. The sound was rhythmic, eternal. It was the same ocean that had witnessed my lonely walk down the aisle. I thought about my parents, packing boxes in a house they could no longer afford. I thought about Kelsey, riding a bus to a minimum wage job, finally learning the value of $1 she actually earned. I didn't feel happy about their pain. I didn't feel sad either. I felt a profound, quiet neutrality. Revenge is often painted as a fire. It is screaming matches and public shaming and burning bridges. But as I leaned my head against Evan's shoulder, feeling the steady beat of his heart, I realized the truth. The best revenge isn't making them scream. It isn't making them suffer. The best revenge is living a life so full, so complete, and so authentic that they simply cannot touch it. It is building a wall not to keep them out, but to keep your own peace in. They were the storm. I was the lighthouse, and the storm had finally passed. "Jasmine?" Evan whispered. "Yeah?" "We figured it out," he said. I smiled in the dark. "Yes," I said. "We did." Thank you so much for listening to my story. It was a long journey from that silent kitchen in Maine to this quiet porch, and I am grateful you walked it with me. I would love to know what you think. Drop a comment below and tell me where you are listening from. And let me know, would you have forgiven them, or would you have closed the door just like I did? I read every single comment. If you enjoyed this story and want to hear more real-life dramas about justice and resilience, please hit that like button, subscribe to the Emma Revenge Stories channel, and don't forget to smash that hype button so this video can reach more people who might need to hear it. Your support helps us tell the stories that matter. See you in the next one.